Well, let's get into it. Mr. Reid Rasmussen, how are you, sir?
Very good. Great to be here, man.
And did I say Rasmussen? Is it Rasmussen? Rasmussen? How do you pronounce it?
Rasmussen it is. Good Danish name.
Yeah, I should have just went with it, and you weren't going to correct me, so that's good. So obviously, Reid, great to have you, man. You're a local guy, and it's always fun to sit down with other local guys that are doing cool things, not only in the industry, but you're doing some very exciting things in the content creation medium space that we're going to get into as well. So very excited to have you on, and thank you for joining me, man.
Absolutely, and it's perfect for us to be here doing an interview together, so I'm with you.
If I can't believe it took me this long even to I was like, why? We had to run into Saya almost on a whim and get to talking from
That's right.
You know, the bells to be going off. I should have Reid on.
That's
right.
This
makes so much sense.
Shame
on me.
You're way into your dozens of interviews so far, so excited to be on here.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very excited to have you, man. So let's get to know you first. We'll talk Freshbenies, and I want to really flesh out that value proposition and what you guys do and what you've built. A very exciting brand that you've built. But before we do that, let's get into you growing up in Canada, right? We were just talking about this.
That's right.
So, grew up in Canada. I want to hear your educational background. Obviously, you've had a nice journey traversing the healthcare space in the U.S., and we'll talk some about your Canadian experience as well. But just start me at the beginning. Who is Reid?
Yeah, I grew up in the Canadian Rockies, so in eastern British Columbia, which means it's north of Idaho by a couple of hours.
Okay.
So you're thinking, what's there? Nothing's there. It was this small little town, and if you weren't into either Christmas tree farming or logging or tourism, you weren't going to stay. My father was a Christmas tree farmer. My mother was a nurse. Small town living. It was idyllic.
Tell me, can I ask about Christmas tree farming though? Because obviously you just see the Christmas trees that have been chopped down, or somebody comes to chop them down. But I know that the process to get them there is obviously years and years. So tell me about what it's like to grow a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah, my grandfather started in the 40s and 50s, and my father took it over when he grew up. And it would have been a business option for me in Canada. It was not the kind of person I was, and my father knew it. He's like, "Hey, just check it before I sell this." Like, this,
you don't want this, right?
Right?
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's you are prepping it in the spring. You let the trees do their work. You harvest them in the fall, and for us, it meant October and November. You were harvesting for December, but that's only because in the north, the trees freeze in October in Canada. And so they don't even know they've been cut down until you bring them into the house. So,
no kidding.
Yeah, so all of our work was really October, November. And
was it a multi-year, or does a tree get to that full size?
Yeah, it took 6 to 8 years.
6 to 8 years.
Yeah. You talk about planning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's 6 to 8 years till you have a business, right? Or does your property find out, I've got Christmas trees on my property, I can turn this into a business? Like, how do you even have that idea?
Well, the way they did it there, the mountainside is there, and you harvest them off of the wild trees that are growing, and you just prep them and prune them so that you let Mother Nature take a little bit more of the control of the.
I was going to say, like, hey, you sit down to the bank and like, hey, I've got this idea, but it's going to take about 8 years before I have a product. But if you'll just trust me, But obviously, nature's contributing quite a bit to that as well.
Yeah, it was. So what it meant there was hard work for the kid who had to climb up the mountainside to bring the trees down or cart them up. So because there was no, you weren't on a farm and able to just do them in rows.
Man, I just
manpower,
way over my head, right? Like I'm completely outside my realm of understanding. But so obviously you decided, well, Christmas tree farming not for me. So
not for me.
Would you go? You went off to college then instead, or
I did. I went to University of Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island, beautiful little spot, and a degree in health administration, which in Canada means you work for the government or you work for a hospital. So I worked for government for about a year. I worked for a hospital for about a year, and then in '91 I skipped the border and came to the U.S. and. Here I ended up on the insurance side of things. Worked for a big HMO up in Seattle that today is part of Kaiser. And then I worked for the Blues because everybody has to find their way through there sooner or later.
It seems like everybody has a stop, right?
Yeah, and there we are. I was in Washington for about 13 years, and then in 2004 got married and moved to Texas, and have been here ever since.
Okay, well I got a couple follow-up questions to that. The first one is. Canada, the U.S., right? Healthcare systems. I mean, that's a common juxtaposition is, hey, well, people from Canada are coming down to the U.S. to get care, but oh, look, there's universal healthcare up there. You'll have some objectivity that you can bring to the table, but can you benchmark those two systems, or what your perspective is, having spent time within both of them?
Dude, I've been asked that question for 30 years of living in America, and my answer is the same, which is it's a system that works for Canadians. it's not a footprint that you could plop into America and have work.
Okay.
And biggest reason is because socially we're different people. And although you go to Canada, you're like, these are nice people. They speak English. It's almost like it's, just another northern state of the United States, which is, you want to piss off a Canadian, say that to them. But the biggest difference is Canadians are different in that they want to care about their neighbor a little bit more, meaning they're willing to pay a little more in taxes. They're willing to wait their turn, and they believe that somebody smarter than them is looking out for their best interests.
Okay.
So if they get told you have to wait for that service on healthcare, they're comfortable with that. And when I think of all the Americans I've met in 30 years living in America, none of them fit that match. I don't care what social, economic. In America, we're about, no, you're not going to tell me it's my turn to wait on the list.
Yeah.
And an example, my father's 87 years old. For the last 5 years, he's been on the waiting list for a knee operation.
Okay.
Finally,
5 years.
5 years.
Okay.
Finally, in September, he got the call. And then when he went in for his test, they're like, you missed your window. You're not, it's not a healthy surgery for us.
Oh, wow.
So it's just too bad, Eric.
So it got deferred so long that it actually wasn't a viable option at that point. That's upsetting.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the downside, right? Like that's a glaring downside.
Their emergency care is fantastic.
Yeah.
Their primary care is fantastic. But everything else beyond that, you're going to wait.
Okay.
And a Canadian's okay with that waiting. And an American's not.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's also maybe a problem of scale? I mean, what's the population roughly of Canada? Do you have?
It's about the population of California.
Okay.
It's about a tenth of
40
the
million or
population
so? Okay.
of America. So it's about 33 million compared to 300 million.
Okay. All right. I mean, that could be, obviously there's and we could have a whole podcast about that, and I don't want to make it about that, but it's just, I think you're in a unique position, which is why you've been asked about it for 3 decades is, hey, tell me what it's like inside of this one, and then tell me about, the American system. So something must have drawn you over the border though to come to the U.S. What was it? Healthcare related, or was it something else? Just personal choice?
It was a girl.
A girl. It's always a girl,
and
man.
chased an opportunity.
Okay.
The girl didn't work out, but the opportunity did, and I've been here ever since. So,
there you go, man.
Yeah, and then I got my citizenship. I say to everybody, like, I'm one of the ones who chose to be an American. All the rest of y'all were just lucky to be here,
We just got born.
But no, I bleed red, white, and blue. I love being an American, and I love being a Texan. So.
Well, that's very cool, man. And you've parlayed that obviously into successful business venture, which again, a couple minutes till we get into that. I do want to sidebar real quick because it sounds like you've for a couple decades also been a national speaker. So talk to me about, juggling those two things, one, but what sort of subject matter do you get into when you go on the speaking tour?
So it was probably late 90s when I was first being asked about the nationalized healthcare system and the next push that was coming out. And when I first moved, it was around Hillary Care, and I was here for that. And then a few years later, I started getting asked about it. I always loved teaching. I'm really a teacher at heart. Loved presenting and speaking. So I started to do some CEs on that nationalized healthcare push. And that has really, turned into hundreds of CE classes and presentations around the country to groups of brokers and other, mostly people inside the industry, but people outside of the benefits industry as well. That really was what launched much of my presentations and classes in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I started my company in 2009, and I just made that as a part of developing content and good content and training classes. Sometimes it would hit on stuff that was specific to what I was selling. Many times it wasn't, but it always gave a lift. And
was it something that's as much of a passion as it is? I'm sure obviously there's a financial component as well, but is this something you pursued because you enjoyed it, or you just thought, oh, well, I might have relevant things to say, so yes, I'll say yes to that first gig? Like, what's the motivation to start this?
It was that I loved teaching.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I figured out that I was okay at it.
Yeah. Well, can I ask about the very first speaking engagement? Were you ready? Were you nervous? I mean, were you over prepared? Take me back.
I had gone to Washington, D.C. with NAHU to Capital Conference. And if you know who the National Association of Health Underwriters is, once a year they all meet in Washington, D.C. They lobby some folks. So I had a representative from Seattle who was a huge proponent of nationalized healthcare. And he said, basically we met with him, me and a few other folks, and we said, here's some of the issues that we think could help stabilize the market. This is back in about 99 maybe.
Okay.
And he said, Reid, okay, that's okay. But what we really need to do is, because of this, this, and this, we need to as quick as possible move to a system like Canada had, because in Canada, everybody had care. It was better outcomes, and it cost less. And he said that to me, and I had this fantastic response, but I didn't have the response until I was on the flight on the way home, right?
Like, oh, dang it. I could have, if I had just said that.
And I was
what
like,
was the response, by the way? Like, do you remember it?
Oh, yeah, I remembered it. It became the core of my presentations. I'm like, if I didn't even have the answers at the ready, what I need to do is I need to teach others enough about a system like that we can sensibly discuss that. So the outcomes are not necessarily indicators of the insurance. They're indicators of the healthcare, not how it's being paid for.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
It's not applicable as to whether it's Canada or the U.S.'s system. So the outcomes that are usually quoted don't really, they're a good differentiator between a third world country and the United States, not two first world countries.
Okay.
So that would say they have better outcomes. Everybody has coverage. Well, that was 100% solved with ACA, right? And people being excluded for pre-existing conditions, like basically that hasn't been an issue in this country for way over a decade, certainly 15 years, right? And yet it still keeps getting brought up, and it was then. And the third was it costs less. Yeah, it costs less. Because a lot of things are excluded, and a lot of things are made illegal, like my father getting a knee surgery. He literally, if he wanted to pay for that in Canada himself, it's literally against the law in Canada.
It's against the law. Okay.
Yeah. And so that doesn't even come in under their system. If he was going to pay for it, it's going to be down here. And I was actually getting set up that in December I was going to bring him down and we were going to take care of that. But we found out we missed the window, right? And
well, see, but that's the discussion that's worth having, right? It's somebody that actually has inside experience with it, direct firsthand experience with it, because like we'll often do this, politically, like they'll prop up certain countries with certain social systems and things like that. And they love to be bringing out those examples. And then you hear from the people inside those systems and they're very quickly, it's easy for them to unpack it. So, not to get into a political realm even at all. It's very easy to prop up an example from the outside and say, well, look, this is why we should do this.
Especially if you're picking one little
You're cherry
piece
picking.
Of it.
Yeah, you're cherry picking it
and
as well.
we cherry pick on our side for our discussion.
Of course. Yeah.
So my first version of that presentation was it was horrible. I had no response for the dude. After that, I prepared and started talking about that all over the place. And to this day, even last month, I was in St. Louis and did like a 3-hour certification course on socialized medicine around the world. So it continues to be a passion that I like to be able to teach on.
Well,
anybody wants to learn about that, reach out to me and I'll get you some recordings of some classes that I've done.
I would love to, right? I mean, just as somebody that, I won't, not so secretly, would have aspirations of doing something like that, but trying to figure out what I would ultimately talk about. I think it's fascinating. Making the choice to be the guy on stage, right? Like it's a little neurotic at the same time. Like, why do you feel like you should be you?
Dude, we pick sales as our career.
I know.
The guy at the front of the room is always the person, the guy or the gal, if it's a man or a woman, that's always the expert in the room.
True, but you're also like you're doing the thing that people are terrified of doing. Most of the people, which is standing in front of a room, feeling proverbially naked in front of everybody and exposed. So I think I'd take the same approach with you. If I don't have an answer, it pains me. Like I go turn around and go find it because I don't want to be exposed, especially if you're propped up as an expert or people want you to be an expert. You got to deliver on that notion. Yeah. So kudos to you, right? I think that's a testament to you to go back and say, I'm going to get an answer to that. So
I would say this as far as any advice for anybody else, though, that the lesson off it is be prepared. Know your subject. Practice. Don't just go up there and wing it. Of course, you're going to look like an idiot. Any of us winging anything makes me look like an idiot.
Yeah.
You play soccer, right? Me going out and winging a game of soccer with you, I'd look like an idiot.
Yeah.
So,
that's fair. Like
prepare.
That's why we have questions ahead of time and we pass them over, But I did find sometimes even when you have a conversation with folks beforehand, right, just getting that rapport built, obviously lowering the guard down a little bit, but that's the same type of thing, preparation. If you went into a conversation like this completely cold, you might be able to wing your way through it just based on personality and things like that, the gift of gab. But I think it's always good to have some sort of structure or guideline to a conversation that you're hoping people are actually going to listen to, right? Yeah. So I'm with you on that. So let's get into fun stuff, right? Okay. I brought you here. I want to talk Freshbenies. Tell me about the origins of Freshbenies.
So it was 2009. The Affordable Care Act was starting to ramp up. Inflation was on healthcare was the first decade of a 20-year run that we now have that healthcare inflation is twice of regular inflation. And we were maybe 8 years into consumerism plans. And yet what I was seeing around the country was we were starting to get up to some significant out-of-pocket exposure. There were a number of cases around in parts of the country where people were getting into $3,000, $3,500, $4,000 out-of-pocket exposures, even in 2009. And I was looking at that and realizing people were installing what we were calling a consumerism plan, high deductible health plan with an HSA. And the broker was just bypassing the fact that, oh, you actually need to open an HSA. And they said, well, it's not my issue. Well, it's about to be your issue, and we as an industry are going to take the hit for it because the Affordable Care Act was ramping up saying the healthcare industry isn't doing anything to help people be better consumers. And I was concerned about all of that playing out. I saw that there were some tools that would help people be better consumers as their out-of-pocket costs drove them into trying to be a better consumer. We told them to be a better consumer, but we didn't give them any tools.
Yeah.
And I saw that there was some, but what they needed to be delivered in a way that was going to make sense to them.
Yeah.
And also there was an idea that had spurred from something I'd seen in Canada, the way they responded to the crunch of their budget in their health market 20 years before. And the light bulb went off and I said, I see what we're going to need is some bundles of tools that help people control their healthcare cost and their healthcare confusion.
Okay.
And I looked at tools like telehealth and advocacy services and savings networks, that they were all good, but I totally understood why somebody who's selling into a mid-sized or smaller employer isn't going out and installing 4 or 5 different vendors in that space. Like, you're lucky if somebody's going to install one vendor in that space.
Yep.
And so I said, what we need is we need a fresh approach to this. We need to bundle these together, deliver them with a great member engagement campaign to make sure that they're actually being used, because the broker and the employer don't have the time and the effort and the expertise to build the engagement campaign. And so you needed to build it turnkey. So that really prompted us. We started Freshbenies in October of 2009.
Okay.
And first couple of years were horribly painful. Nobody was listening. I actually originally thought we would sell to carriers, and carriers weren't at all interested in that.
Really?
They were slightly busy installing ACA plans.
Sure.
But they didn't catch that there was any need to do anything other than just insurance. And so we went out and rebranded. We turned into what we have today as Freshbenies, and that is an employee benefit program that's really turnkey and ready to go out there.
Well, I'd like the term you used a moment ago, I really like the healthcare cost, but the healthcare confusion. I think healthcare confusion is hitting the nail on the head. That you mentioned trying to pull in 5 different programs or 5 different vendor point services and try to sell one of them as a standalone, let alone bundle 5 of those together by yourself, right? Or as a broker trying to quarterback those things.
Right.
It's virtually impossible.
And you're talking about in a group where, when you're a broker or consultant and you're putting together a plan for a group, there's medical, dental, vision, life, DI, some 401k, some this, some that. It's so easy to get a dozen or 2 dozen different tools in there pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, that member's just sitting there going, all I heard was what you told me how much my medical is going to cost me. And like we're confused as an industry that people don't even know the terms of copay, coinsurance, and deductible, let alone when the emergency happens and it's Saturday night at 10 o'clock. Where do you go and what do you do? People used to, I think one of the things that happened in the last year that's been interesting, people used to just say, okay, well, I'm going to walk down the hall and talk to HR when I need something. And so HR was really most people's advocate. Now, the consultant would say that they're there to be the advocate, but HR is the front line. So HR takes the first 20 questions, 2 of them make it to the brokerage, right? But the first 18 were handled by HR. Well, what happened in the last year? A lot of people can't walk down the hall. And like they lost their communication channel.
Yeah.
So now they're at home and they're still frustrated by this stuff. They aren't sure where to go. There was no navigation plan for helping people to have call here when you need some help navigating the system.
Yeah.
Or if you have some questions. So instead, they're kind of still reaching to HR, kind of not. Most stress time than any of us have ever had before. Absolutely for us this year. Up until this year, telehealth was for 11 years out of 12, telehealth was the number 1 conversation every broker and consultant wanted to have with us. And this year, we came across January 1st of this year, and all of a sudden it was advocacy.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's the biggest driver of sales we've made this year.
Well, I'm sure part of you is going, guys, we've had this forever. Why are you utilizing it until it's like an emergent situation and then you need it? Like it's been here all along. But the other part is going, well, thank God we had the foresight and understood whether or not you had the foresight for that, but knowing that the advocacy is crucial in times of need. So how were they utilizing it? What were they latching onto about that part of the package in the time of the pandemic? Tell me about that.
Well, everybody was confused about where they were going for things.
Okay.
Some of those who had already engaged with advocacy were using the advocates to shut down some of the visits that they needed to have. We saw a mix across our groups. Right in March 2020, we had some groups who were calling and saying we're immediately cutting everything that we can. We had some other groups who were calling and saying, oh my gosh, we only provided this to some of our people. They're now all of a sudden about to be at home. We need to make sure that we're giving this to all of the employees, even our part-timers and those that were unbenefited. And so we saw a real different response from different populations. And then telehealth was available everywhere. And the initial response in March was, it's going to be free if it's related to COVID. So everybody went wherever they could to their own doctor or their local hospital, whatever, for telehealth services. And then the visit fees started to come back on most medical plans around the country, as far as other places that they could get telehealth. Visit fees came back, and so that usage has been dropping dramatically back to the pre-pandemic levels on telehealth that's inside a medical plan. Ours has always been strong and continues to be strong. For a while, it looked like ours was redundant in that it was free as a telehealth visit inside a medical plan. That's going away, and now the awareness of, wow, this is even more important to have telehealth with a zero visit fee attached to it that's available. And our usage is about 10 times of the usage when it's included in a medical plan.
No kidding. Yeah, okay, 10 times. That's outstanding. And so what else is, what are the other things that are involved in the bundle? We mentioned advocacy, we mentioned telehealth. There's a few more other solutions.
We've got some savings networks. So on some plans, it's just pharmacy, other place for a pharmacy savings network to search one or multiple different PBM locations, see can we get a better cash price than even the price that's on a given plan, because sometimes that's the case, or something that's out of network or non-formulary, I should say. Some of our plans, we include dental and vision, because as much as every employer offers dental and vision, it's a rare employer these days who's paying for it completely for their people. So it's a voluntary offering, and generally that means about a third to half of the people elect it.
Okay.
And that means a half to two-thirds don't elect it.
Yeah.
And so what are you doing for them? Well, we left them to pay full retail in a false-priced economy. And so let's get them let's say a third discount on a set of glasses or some teeth whitening or something. So it ends up being, like I say, a good consumerism tool. You might not have delivered that on your own to the group, but when it's a part of this and you realize, okay, well, that works for some percentage of the people, let's at least make sure it's there. It's good when it didn't require a separate install. And then we wrap the whole thing in engagement tools. So we have tools like Benny Wallet as a home base to keep all your various cards. Okay. Give a reason for people to activate their account, get in there, be that home base for people's benefits. And it happens to be the very same place that they store their medical card, their Vax card, their dental card, their driver's license. Oh, and that way, the day that they get some they know they need to go get an MRI. They know where their advocate is. Oh, that's just this button over here. I can go over here and I can check the price on an MRI.
Well, that's the simplicity is kind of the overarching theme, right?
It's like around changing habits, right?
Yeah.
You asked me, do I feel frustrated about the fact that for 12 years I've had advocacy inside our bundles, and that this year is the first time that it's been the biggest topic? It's the reality of you can't get people to engage with everything all at once, right?
Sure.
It's like when you go in and when you were a consultant yourself, when you'd go in and build a benefit plan for a group, that it's a multi-year plan because you can't teach them everything all in 1 year. So we recognize that as well. It's a matter of how do you eat an elephant, right?
Well, bite at a time. One bite at a time. Yeah. So I'm a follow-up question. I want to talk about building it with Heidi. Are you kind of working with your wife? But my question preceding that is, what else are you kind of seeing in that point solution space that might be an interesting additional bolt-on that you guys, maybe don't tell me the secret sauce, but I know there's some other cool stuff out there. We talk to vendors all the time ourselves. So has anything caught your eye that you're looking at or might be relevant to what you do?
Well, we didn't specifically call out the type of telehealth that is the hottest topic in the last couple of years, and that is behavioral telehealth. And that is a piece of what we've got. It's the other piece that's dramatically getting a lot of attention right now, far more attention than even the number of visits occur. But for the person who needs it, it's dramatically helpful. So we keep watching to see what the market and what our audience is ready to engage with. On the last few years, we've probably given a significant consideration on about 50 different vendors that we might roll in.
Oh, interesting.
And we've picked one or two.
Yeah.
You know, because there's only so many that you can install right away. A couple of years ago,
well,
we
you don't
looked
want
at
paralysis by now, so you don't want to overwhelm people with the number of solutions, and they can't make heads or tails of what you're doing too.
We'd actually considered that a few years ago. Of do we make ourselves just this platform that has like a huge menu of all these different benefit modules? And when we rolled it out to our broker advisory group, they're like, "Dude, there's no way that we're prepared for this. Like, it's too much." And so we're careful about how we would add some things.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, when I used to do RFPs myself within an agency, I mean, you're spending 90% of your time on the medical, and then you get to dental and vision and life and disability and the renewal. So if you have a point solution or a bundle of point solutions, that it becomes overwhelming to even discuss or consider.
Yeah.
They dismiss it rather than try to make sense of it. You know?
Right.
So you want to make it simple, right? You want to keep it simple, stupid. The KISS principle, right?
Yeah. So your question of what else is out there. So we keep watching categories like financial wellness. We look at other health categories. Specifically, are there other, what are the next specialties that'll be coming through on telehealth? What are the next sensible pieces that are a fit? And we look for them to be a fit across a broad population of our clients, not just like, oh, there's 3% of our clients who do this unique special thing. We aren't trying to solve for that. We're trying to solve for the mass. So.
Absolutely. I completely agree there, because people want to sometimes do very niche type things at plan site. And our goal is to solve for that 80 or 90% of that's transactional that happens over and over again, not just this really unique, cool thing that'd be awesome if we figure it out over time. Yeah, it probably is, but that's not our highest priority at the moment. So you have to do what makes sense for your own business as well.
And at plan site, you guys are dealing with a much longer list than we are. I mean, you're dealing with huge volumes of carriers.
Yeah, huge volume of carriers across all those lines of coverage. So I think somebody the other day looked at it's 22 or 23 lines of coverage plus point services, right? So you have everybody that's tied to those. Some of them are redundant. Some carriers have 7 or 8 lines.
Right.
So yeah, you're trying to manage all those. You're trying to manage every single funding type with self-funded, fully insured, level-funded ACA, dental ASO, fully insured dental, level-funded dental. I mean, it's mind-boggling, the variables, right? So we're trying to solve, again, for the Pareto principle of 80% of the time, what do we do well? And then if a variable comes up that we didn't anticipate, we solve for that when it's appropriate. But the expectation, I think some people have the expectation that you guys have solved for everything in advance of even coming to the market and being there for a few years. Oh, you guys surely thought of that thing that we just came up with ourselves just now. Why didn't you guys think of that already? It's like, well, because we didn't think of it. It's just, you're trying to solve for the biggest problem, and then you end up rounding out the edges over time.
That's right.
That's how you do it. So I do want to ask about building with Heidi. Did you start the company with Heidi? Did she come on later? And obviously you guys have been working together for a decade. So just tell me the experience of building a company with your wife. I think it'd be a fun story.
Yeah, Heidi was not in the benefits business. She was in the retail world, and she was there, and it was a discussion between the two of us to quit the job that I was at Benefit Mall.
Oh, Benefit Mall. That's right. I forgot that.
And start the company, and that we really believed in it. And she said, okay, well, I believe in it too. I trust you. I will be your chief sugar mama officer. I'll keep my job. We had some savings. We're like, okay, let's go do this. Cool. And so for about the first 2.5 years, it was just me. And then the company she was at, new CEO came in. She was a vice president. She got let go. I said, perfect. I was just about the time I needed some more help over here. Things were starting to roll a bit. And even though we weren't really making much money at that point in time, I wasn't even taking a salary at that point. She's like, are you sure that's a sensible play? And I go, come on, let's do it.
Yeah, let's go all in. Let's do it.
And we agreed. We said, hey, listen, if we can't make it go of this in a year, we'll go do something different. And so, but in a year, things really took off. So it took that first 2.5 years to first couple of years to really dial in who was our customer, what were we doing, how were we selling it. And that year she joined, she really rebranded the company, improved our marketing, and things started to shoot up. We tripled that year. We tripled the next year. We tripled the next year. We ended up as the 117th fastest growing company in the United States with a track record like that, and on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. We were on that for a few years in a row. So that was a blast, and she was right there with me. So she was the first investor, so to speak, and then she was the next employee, and then we built a team since then. And she's a great operator and implementer, a great planner, great marketer. So and then for me, I handle more of the direction on the healthcare industry and the sales side of things. And then we have one other friend who's a partner who is our chief strategy officer, and she's far more of like the financial and strategy brain. So we say between us, I'm PowerPoint, Heidi is Word, and our friend Tanya is Excel. So we make a good Microsoft Office together.
Yeah, you do. That's actually great. It's great to hear though, because obviously you guys, it sounds like you complement each other and your skill sets very well, which is it's not always the case. Sometimes you might butt heads, and I'm sure there's times where you guys disagree. It's part of running a business and being married.
One of those bold discussions was going on this morning as we were talking about. Well, no, we need to do this next. No, we need to do this next. But you play fair, and you got to learn your
whatever happens behind the scenes. Of course, it sounds like you guys are on the right track. I mean, you've been at it for 11, 12 years now, and you mentioned a couple of times being one of the fastest growing companies. So I appreciate the fact that you guys, when you went all in, that's when the acceleration happened. It seems like life tends to reward the bold step. You can't, they say you can't serve two masters. Eventually, at one point, you just gotta go for it. It's kudos to you guys for building it. I've had a number of folks that have built companies on this show, and probably one of my favorite topics outside of self-funding and stop loss is the entrepreneurial spirit of the American spirit of building a business, and then hearing it doesn't always work, but when it does work, it's fun to hear that story. Yeah. So good. I mean, good for you, man. Awesome. Very, very excited about that. So can we tie it into self-funding for just a second? Tell me, is there a difference in your solution for a fully insured group, level funded group, self-funded group? Does it even matter?
We sell to a ton of fully insured businesses and a ton of self-funded. Very often it's the same bundle. Mm-hmm. We have various bundle solutions. Very often that same bundle might be in a fully insured group that is in the self-funded group, but the way it's sold is a little different, and what the employer cares about is significantly different. It's no surprise, and that is the self-funded employer wants to know, prove to me how much it's getting used, and prove to me how much ROI that's bringing me.
I see.
And so a statement that I have quoted no less than 10,000 times is, to a self-funded group, they're losing money if they don't have Freshbenies installed, because our usage levels are so high compared to other solutions like this in the marketplace that the amount of unnecessary claims that we save dwarfs the cost of the service. Yeah. So I was looking at a group that happens to be in the DFW Metroplex. It is a water district. I won't name which one, but they've got about 300 employees. They've been with us since 2014. So it's 6.5 years. I just pulled the numbers yesterday. In gross, we've saved them over $1 million in unnecessary claims over the years, between the telehealth and the advocacy and some of the other savings networks. And in that time, we've cost $223,000 for our membership. So, when you have a benefit that actually helped change the culture and empower people to be better consumers, and by the way, net saved 3 times what you invested on it.
Well, let's just say, right, like depending on what hat you're wearing, the enhancement of the benefit in the offering you can use as an attractor for a talent or retention tool. That there's something to that, right? But the tangible, I'm a data-driven guy, the tangible ROI, prove to me that this works, makes sense, right? And if you check both of those boxes, then I don't want to say it's an easy sell, but it's an easier sell to be able to convince people that it's useful, right?
It's so much better now than 10 years ago when we had to say, I promise you.
Trust me.
Yeah, trust me. And instead, we have thousands of groups that we've helped, and we can point to, and we can say, even on these ones where you saw it and you're like, wow, it didn't engage, it didn't work. What was the lesson from that? And you use that to improve the experience on the new cases that are coming on, so that even your failures were the things that taught you. But isn't it better having 12 years of failures behind you so that group that comes on now, you have more of a chance of having a success?
Well, we go through that right now. Like we clearly know some of the time savings that we're deriving from our system because we know how much time it takes a spreadsheet, go 12 different carriers, sift through their 15-page PDFs, transcribe that into an Excel document, sift through them. How many did you determine were ultimately even uncompetitive and you wasted an hour of your time? We know how much time the bad way to do it does. We're still working on honing in the tangibility of our own data to quantify the savings itself, right? So we're going through that iterative process at the moment, like you're describing. Now you can point to a 12-year track record. We're on the cusp of being able to point to that quantifiable ROI in terms of time and money savings. Yeah. But it takes a couple years, it takes a couple revolutions to be able to prove it. Because it's easy to point to anecdotal data, but I would rather have real aggregate data that's provable and credible to be able to report back.
We there's an organization called the Validation Institute, and their job within the healthcare industry was to say, okay, everybody's making all these promises over how much money things are saving. Let's really put some data scientists to the test on these. And you go to them and you answer a jillion questions about the way that you're calculating your ROI, your surveys, your studies, the work that you've done, and they come back and challenge you on the way that's done. It's actually a great process to go through.
Interesting, yeah.
We went to them, and in 2019, we won a national award for the way that we calculate ROI on our telehealth usages. And in 2019, we got one as well for the way that we calculate ROI on our advocacy savings usage. And when I first moved to the U.S., I was a data analyst for my first 6 years in the industry.
Makes sense.
And as a data analyst, like I was diving into this stuff all the time. So most people, I don't really sort of open that, 5-hour conversation about let's talk data analytics around this kind of stuff. But I can. What I do tend to hear out of some folks is they'll hear our comments on the fact that, as a whole, Freshbenies has saved our clients over $90 million over the years. And some of the people who are the very same people who are talking their clients into, huge $1 million budgets for employee benefits. And, oh, by the way, it went up and now it's 1.1 million. The very ones who are selling huge increases in insurance costs are looking at us and saying, I'm not sure that it saves that much. I'm like, are you kidding me?
We've been validated by the Validation Institute. We've won an award. Like, what more do you need?
And I can go into the long description for you, but the truth is, we're saving real visits, and we're guiding people towards price transparency, and we're saving emergency room visits that would have occurred tonight if you hadn't had a telehealth visit. And like, we can point to the data. I love engaging the conversation though, and I do appreciate that they're asking us and challenging us to prove it, because there's some other guys out there who might be saying, "Oh, I can get you what Freshbenies is doing," but they haven't put the time and the effort in. They haven't put the validation in. And the service.
There's a credibility aspect to it, right? Yeah.
There's a reason that we're getting the value that we are. It's because we put a little bit more work and effort in on it. Yeah. And
you guys are doing awesome stuff. I do want to ask you about brokers and cars getting coffee.
What's that?
I know, it's an idea that I had. I wanted to pitch it to you live on air to see if you want to do it. No, but brokers and cars getting coffee, by far, to me, over the last year and a half, one of the standout brands that's been built on LinkedIn in terms of content that's useful for our space. So I do want to give you the plaudits for a moment. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's super well done. I mean, the production value is very high, which, you seeing people just record things on their video, sometimes or on their camera, sometimes they're better than others. It's clear that you guys have put some effort and thought into this. So the origins, I think, are fairly obvious. Comedians and cars getting coffee, brokers and cars getting coffee.
Right. I'm a huge Jerry Seinfeld fan.
It's okay. But I want to talk to you. Some of the things that maybe people don't consider is the actual time and effort and perhaps expense to do this. If you're willing to break the fourth wall for a moment, as somebody that does this myself, I'd like to hear your story about actually doing the work to build that product.
Okay, well, if we're breaking the fourth wall, then I'm
talk to the camera directly. Right? Yeah. Exactly.
No, and we talked about this when we ran into each other at Saya. It was an idea of recognizing video is, if you're going to be a thought leader on LinkedIn and social these days, video is super strong, and the platform encourages that. And so how are you doing that? And I love that you've come up with a way that is very high quality on your production value on it. and you're doing an interview and you go the long form on the interview. For us, our approach was we liked the idea. For me, it was a bit of, okay, what's the game or the format going to be? Once I sort of figured that out, then I was like, okay, I can repeat that. And I can picture being able to have some interviews with folks. And the idea was pre-pandemic. And I had done my first 4 interviews in February of 2020.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. And I was actually doing them in people's cars and was using just phone cameras attached inside the cars. And
well, even at that time, though, pre-pandemic, were you still in separate vehicles with your own camera?
No, I was
together.
Doing it. And so I was doing it like I went to DC for a conference. And so I interviewed one person there, and I went to Houston. So I interviewed a couple different brokers there, and I'd gotten a few of these in the hopper. Found out along the way some of the technical stuff that was a problem, like completely ruined 2 interviews because my mics were all set up wrong. And
I know.
You know what I mean? Like
I know the feeling.
Stuff that you do where you're like, oh, I have to actually invest in proper quality. And then we went to go launch it in March of 2020. And all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and I'm like, hold it, I just started this. And the whole goal was to be in my car with somebody else in my car to do an interview, because that was just kind of the theme. And now I can't be in a car with people. And I had to figure out how to shift and adjust. And what I came up with was have that person film in their car, I'll film in my car. And at least it was, the idea was, how do you get people out of their normal environment where our ego and our walls are up just a little bit higher? How can you put a good cup of coffee in their hands? Thanks for the cold brew.
My pleasure. Yeah.
And
thank you, Venture X.
And just get a person to just chat with you. Because what I love about like running into you at Saya was I just love talking about our craft. What I loved about Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is it's some people talking about their craft. I'm not even their craft. I'm a fan of all their craft, but I'm not even their craft. But I loved listening to it. And I thought, it's a good way to take some advice from different brokers from very different backgrounds around the country. And the goal was, how can we pull some of that wisdom and put it out there so that we weren't doing it so that the competitor across the street from that broker can hear all their secrets. It's more around, how do you spread those secrets to all the other people around the country who aren't going to get the chance to have a cup of coffee with that person? Because there's some great lessons that are out there, right?
To me, you talked about, kind of letting the guard down or just having a cup of coffee with somebody, the rapport you build. You're letting your guard down to agree, but you're humanizing the person on the other side of that. Like you're doing with those brokers. And producers sometimes can be intimidating characters, right? Especially in their element. So you get them out of that element, get them in their car where they're comfortable, they're more relaxed, they're driving, and you're asking conversations that are still relevant to what they do and the expertise they bring. But there is a humanization that happens. And that's one of the big things that I like to do here is, who's the person that I'm actually talking to, not just what's the product that they sell. I love the person as much as the product. I want almost to be the afterthought. Oh yeah, by the way, Reid does Freshbenies, and that's a great product. But I like Reid. He's so likable and charming and funny, and he does his own stuff. Like those are the people you want to do business with, and that's just my approach. And I think you probably have a similar sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just no question, it's a key for us. You said sort of what's the production look like?
Logistics. Like I'm
doing one tomorrow, and it's with. It's Eugene Starks out of Mississippi.
Yes, I know the name. Yeah.
So on the Nahu board.
Yeah.
So he'll be in his car at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be in mine. We'll do a call. We'll record from both sides. We'll spend about 45 minutes talking through a list of questions. And mostly it is just a discussion of what do they see in the marketplace. For somebody like Eugene, I'll be asking a lot since he travels a lot and talks to a lot of different brokers because of his role with Nahu. What's he seeing there? What's hot right now? What's timely? Along the way, I'll ask about their background. And one of my favorite questions is, you got a crazy client story. All of us in sales, you know, we all have these ones where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy. So, one of the best ones so far was Brett Brummett. He tells about this guy who showed up. He goes to do this home appointment to sell him some life insurance, and he shows up naked. Like that's the kind of
that's a crazy client story.
Those are like bar stories for life for salespeople, right? So everybody's got a kind of a funny story of some kind. So I'll ask him about that. We'll see where that goes, and then. But I know that, like for me, we chose to spend a lot of effort to siphon that down to be very rapid fire into about a 6 or a 7 minute video clip. And as it is, even for social, most people would say 7 minutes is too long. People aren't going to watch it.
You guys keep the pacing really fast. Like everything is rapid fire, which I think works really well, even if it's a little longer of a clip.
we agree with you, and it's what we're hearing out of folks is as long as we keep it good and keep it rapid fire, then that's worth it. And so what it means for us is it takes many hours for us to summarize that and to get those clips down, to organize it in a way that makes sense. We pull in some graphics to help carry the story. Sometimes somebody will tell a story that might have been 4 minutes long in them telling it, but we're trying to fit it into a 30-second view. So sometimes a graphic might help sort of carry over some of what they were trying to express before, because you didn't have a clip that just summarized it in 30 seconds.
Yep.
And so we started pulling graphics. We found out that a lot of people just liked it because of the little bit of, that's kind of fun. And so you'll see emoticons popping up and different stuff. So it's some of this stuff that...
We'll just add some layers, right? It kind of changes the pace a little bit. It adds some textual stuff to it, and that makes sense. But, talk to me about the hours, because I'm sure that the editing process, the shooting process you said takes 45 minutes. Maybe the lead time to write questions will add another half hour or so. So maybe you're an hour and a half into that. But is more work on the tail end of putting it together?
Yeah, it's probably 5 hours to plan out how you're going to cut it up. We work with an outside videographer who then cuts it. We usually we've got it down pretty good now. He's pretty good at knowing our us. Used to be in our industry. In fact, he used to work for me. So
there you go. So you don't have to explain benefits to him.
Yeah,
which is
he's got a good handle on that. So usually in a couple of rounds back and forth, we can get that cleaned up. Work with a graphic designer to throw in some graphics, and usually a couple of weeks from when we interview, we're able to release it. So we're doing about one a month these days.
Well, you guys, you set the bar high, right? So anybody that's listening to this and hasn't watched it yet, Brokers and Cars Getting Coffee, I guess LinkedIn, YouTube, I'm sure you have a YouTube channel for it. What's the best place for them to find that?
Come find me on LinkedIn. Reid Rasmussen on LinkedIn. There aren't many of us, and I'm the only one with Brokers and Cars Getting Coffee.
Yeah, so definitely. So the reason I want to say that, I wanted people to check it out, but also to understand, you've taken it maybe to the furthest degree in our space, right? I'm sure there are obviously production companies that do other things outside of the insurance space, but you guys have put a lot of effort into it, and it shows. It's also why presumably once a month the frequency is all you're really able to attain, because it's a lot of effort, and I think it's useful for people to know that if you want to get it to that extent, it's a big commitment to do that. However, you also don't have to do it to that extent and still make yourself relevant in the space. So not
just like being an entrepreneur, start where you are and grow from there, but keep learning and getting better.
Well, complimenting on that, I guess a little bit, outside of the Brokers and Cars Getting Coffee, what other sort of social media marketing stuff have you found useful and relevant in 2021?
Well, social media and marketing for us has always been super strong. We for years have been putting out content. We put out content from training classes, but also for years we've been putting out different training and promotional flyers on our product, infographics, blogs. We've been blogging for 9-10 years now at this point in time. Always a monthly newsletter that's been going for 10 years in a row. Okay. Just all kinds of writing and different pieces like that. We've seen that shift over time to shorter and shorter pieces. People want better summary information. Generally in August, for example, we always do we'll do our sort of last training launch, like our last webinar before we go into fourth quarter. And years ago, it was an hour-long webinar. And then it was an hour-long webinar with multiple different speakers in it, because we knew we had to kind of mix it up a little bit. A couple years ago, we changed to a 45-minute webinar and then a half-an-hour webinar. This year, we're like, I think even a half-an-hour webinar is going to be too much for people. We're seeing what we've noticed on social media, which is shorter content is playing better. So this year in August, what we did was we launched a page where we put a number of 2-minute videos in. And instead of having to think from a presentation standpoint of, I need to teach all of this from start to middle to finish, just pull out one case study and a good point. Pull out 2 different strategies that'll work in a given category. And so we put together this, we put it on a page, we called it Fresh Flicks, like Netflix. We're like, hey, you want to watch just a couple minutes on this? We thought a lot of people would prefer to watch, if we get somebody to watch 1 or 2 or 3 couple-minute videos that weren't going to sit in on a half-hour webinar, great. Well, we happen to still do the half-hour webinar. We've had thousands of views on the videos, and we had few hundred people in on the webinar. Yeah. So what we saw was we're having a shift and change into things like this, where people are absorbing content different. Yeah. One of the things we noticed during COVID was some people weren't at all responding to us on email, but they might be connecting with us on LinkedIn, and I could get a chat, a back channel on LinkedIn.
Way more, it seems like, for outreach and communication these days, even quick communication. You can even tell sometimes, hey, active on LinkedIn, you know they're there, right? So I'm going to ping them on LinkedIn. The response rate I found is even higher sometimes in email because you get dumped into a general email inbox. And it's not as timely, but people often have LinkedIn even open on their desktop or on their phone and get a little notification. They'll go respond to that pretty quickly.
And what I notice is some population engages there, and some doesn't.
True.
But for those who do, it's probably engaging better than going through their email
or even
trying
text.
trying to reach them on a phone call. So I think for us, we're looking at more things like different ways to be able to do some video, maybe in some of the email communications.
Is there a Freshbenies TikTok yet? Do you guys have a TikTok?
There is not a TikTok.
Okay.
We have talked about it, but we're like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, I don't think I'm funny enough or cool enough for TikTok.
I mean, I'm 39. I feel like that thing passed me by, and there's so many other things that I could be doing with my time that but I laugh because there's literal TikTok influencer people that are dancing on video for 10 seconds and have millions of views. Just like, I feel like that old boomer now that's like, I don't even understand that.
Dad.
Oh, Dad, yeah. My daughter will tell me all about it in a few years, probably, I'm sure. But let's wrap it up. I want to keep you on track with time, and I know you're busy, man. A couple more questions, and we'll get you on.
And then I got a couple questions for you.
Sure. Why don't you throw those out there, and then we'll wrap up with mine.
Okay. Well, you're always asking this audience, and I interview as well. So, you got to tell me about PlanSite. Like, who's an ideal client for you on PlanSite?
Yeah. Well, so our primary client is the retail agency. So usually a retail agency with a few hundred clients up to a few thousand clients. We've seen that mix be very good for us, that middle market dominant, maybe in a state, maybe they dominate a state, or they're a large agency that has autonomy at a local level. Those things to get something done faster tends to help. But the retail agent with a fairly large block of business that has a good mix of ACA and fully insured and level funded and self-funded and wants a singular solution or a singular tool to help create efficiencies and not just, I've got an ACA quoting tool and I'm happy with that and I'll do everything else over here in Excel. Yep. It's kind of a one-stop shop solution from start to finish for an RFP. So folks that the pain is obviously strong enough in the way they do things today, but they see the vision of porting it over to a platform that will allow distribution of that information to other systems. They see the vision of the long-term gain, and they're willing to kind of come along with us to get set up and ramped up over the course of, a few months, I would say, to get started.
And it's a beautiful platform that y'all have.
Yeah.
What states do you work in or not work in?
The ACA, I believe we're in all 50 states now. We started here in Texas. We're home officed in Salt Lake City, the Utah market. So we're very, very present there. We've opened up Michigan, opening up Indiana. And so we're taking an incremental rollout because there is connectivity with the carriers and local reps. So you can't just turn the switch on software like this and expect everybody to adopt it overnight. So we're just being strategic about those types of rollouts.
So if some consultants are in those states, they can reach out to you.
In those states, but there is no state that's off limits. It's just, again, is it the right profile broker? Are they committed to the cause? We can get you up and running pretty quickly, but we just want to make sure people buy into the partnership and not just looking for something that's a knee-jerk reaction to a problem they have.
Okay, everybody reach out to PlanSite. That's
PlanSite. PlanSight.com. Not PlanSite, not PlanSource. So our friends over at PlanSource, we're not PlanSource, PlanSight.com for sure. But thank you for that shameless plug.
And then one of my favorite questions is, what do you have for a fun sales story for us?
Well, so a fun story, not quite the guy showing up to his door naked, although, hey, maybe that's in my future at some point. I don't think brokers operate around their office naked very often.
Not very often.
Not very often, but I'm sure it's happened. My favorite story is actually early on in my sales career at Sun Life. I was grinding away in my first full year. Just wanted to do anything I could to hit my sales goal. And I was right there, and I just hit it. But I'm thinking ahead, right? Hey, man, if I could sell more cases, there's more bonuses on this. And I'm going to keep grinding while people have given up. And so I literally, on New Year's Eve, it was a Saturday, my wife's getting ready for us to go out to New Year's Eve dinner, and I'm working on a case with a broker in West Texas, and I actually worked it, and we worked back and forth. I found an underwriter that was willing to give me the revised quote, and I actually sold my last case of the year at like 6 o'clock at night on New Year's Eve, and it pushed me over the goal, got me to an accelerator, and it was like, it also ended up Rookie of the Year, right? Most sales for a newcomer, but it was just like, oh my God, if I just don't pump the brakes and keep going, I can sell a case on New Year's Eve and that's a nice way to, ring in the new year. So that was probably my favorite sales story because it was just a matter of staying attentive, right? And working it to the end.
That is awesome. I had a sales coach who used to say to me, it's always the middle of the month.
Yeah.
Always the middle of the month. Especially as you get to the last few days of the month, it's always the middle of the month.
Yeah, you got to have that mindset, man. And I don't know, maybe I was just, they used to call me Turbo because I was pedal to the metal all the time. I actually had a red Mustang at the time too. So it was like, I was literally Turbo to them, but it was like, I just wanted to get in there and I wanted to do everything overnight. So that was probably a testament to the fact that I couldn't even let off while my wife's getting ready for our New Year's Eve dinner. But hey, it worked out. I made a sale.
And you got a story to tell all these years later.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
That's awesome.
So that's probably one of my favorite sales story. I'll try to think of, without stepping in it too much, maybe some of the not so kind to other people sales stories, because there's a few of those out there as well.
We'll pick those up over the next cup of coffee, next beer, whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly, man. So last but not least, Reid, we mentioned this already, but find you on LinkedIn, right? Probably the best place to reach out. Freshbenies.com. You want to spell Freshbenies for us real quick?
It's Freshbenies. It's just one N.
I've made that mistake. So glad you pointed that out. And of course, I'll have it underneath when we release the clips, and people will be able to find you. I'll tag you as well. But is LinkedIn, in your opinion, the best way for a new person to connect with you?
It's a fantastic way. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm in there all the time. So,
well, I can't wait to see the next episode of Brokers and Cars with Getting Coffee.
And I can't wait to see will we be episode 27? 28. You got some in the hopper
maybe
already.
Like 30, honestly. You may be around 30.
You're way
I did it
ahead
intentionally,
on this.
right? I try to keep a frequency of once a week, and so I took a pause for about 6 weeks to build up a backlog, and so I'm trying to stay on top of that. So
good for you.
So you're about episode 30, so I'll probably get yours out somewhere in the early December. I'll give you a heads up ahead of time, and I can't wait to release it because I think there's going to be some good nuggets to grab out of this one as well.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for the time and the discussion and the story.
I appreciate you, man. We'll have you on again soon. Thanks, Reid.
Take care.
Take care, man.